Okay, here begins an American adventure. I've thought a lot about what do I call sort of the life and times, the story of my life that so many people have asked me and encouraged me to tell, to write it down. So this begins a series of video memoirs, stories, if you will, that will be used, hopefully, to transcribe and to edit into a book that I hope to write one day. I don't know exactly what direction I want a book to go, but what I do know is that it starts by getting the stories down. So here we go. The life, the times of Travis Rawl. This is episode 1. And in order to get to know me, you have to kind of understand who my family is, who they were, where I come from, in order to piece together the things that really formed the person that I am now and the person that I've been throughout my life. So today, this episode will focus really on my mom's family. My mom came from a family of 4 girls. She was born in Nebraska. Her mom's family were Nebraskan homesteaders. So their family goes all the way back to the original land grant in Nebraska. And from there, she meets my granddad, and so we'll get into that. But first I want to say this. When I say I'm an American, a lot of people can tell you when their ancestors got to the United States. And of course, the indigenous and Native Americans, they were here many, many years prior to any settlers. But both my mother's mom, Hertha Herweg, and her father, Jack Herweg, can trace their lineage back to the Mayflower, 2 different people on the Mayflower. My grandmother, my mother's mom, was related to William Bradford, who's well known in the history books. And my grandfather traces back to a man named John White, both of whom are on the Mayflower Manifesto. So when I say I'm American, I mean like I'm here. I'm the mix of all of the generations of people that have come over since the very first and earliest settlers in the United States. So that's definitely a big piece of who I am. As I said, my grandmother's family were homesteaders. She was, I believe, the 12th child out of 15 children on a farm in Nebraska. Grew up, the Great Depression, all of those things. And she married my grandfather, Jack Herweg. He really was an enormous influence on my life. He was, as you might say, a man's man. They call him the greatest generation because they were men. They really did things that men today largely seem incapable of. And I don't think it's because men are not capable. I think the circumstances are such that maybe men are less likely to choose hard things the way the greatest generation did. But my grandfather lied about his age in order to go off to war for World War II. He was Purple-Hearted. He was in World War II. He was in Korea around the time my mom was born. And so this guy was amazing. He was a frogman radio operator, is my understanding. So that's sort of a precursor to the Navy SEALs in communications. He was brilliant. He was at the forefront of air conditioning and automotive air conditioning engineering. He was an inventor. He has multiple patents that include patents for an air conditioner in a Cessna airplane, patents for an exercise machine, air conditioning, patents for the automobile industry. His family, my mom, grew up, they had air conditioning in their cars before they had air conditioning in their home, just to tell you a little bit. And so that's a side of a family that they were bootstrappers. So I grew up around my granddad, who wanted to hunt, he wanted to fish, he wanted to tinker, but he was also an artist. I'll never forget that when I was over there as a kid, he would always record on videotape the Bob Ross show. He liked watching art shows. He liked watching Bob Ross. but he always recorded the Bob Ross shows. And when asked about it, he would say, when I retire, I'm going to learn to paint. And he did exactly that. So as a retired man, he not only learned to paint, but he also learned about computers. As an older person, he really dug into personal computers, building his own computers, and would teach lessons at the local junior college, both for painting and for computer usage. And these lessons were not for your normal college age students. These were college classes for senior citizens that wanted to go and be a part of various things to learn about computers, maybe how to create a Word document or to create an email, things like that, organize photos that they'd had digitized. He would work with senior citizens to teach them these things. So he was a teacher, he was an inventor, he was a military man. And so he was a guy that I really looked up to. Any stories that I tell, Dixie, you're killing me. So the stories that I tell about my grandfather, the ideas that I've had to create my own adventures, to be independent, to go a different direction, are heavily influenced just by knowing my grandfather and who he was. There was nothing that was too hard for him, nothing that he wouldn't at least give a try. And he became a very accomplished painter, and he became an accomplished computer user back in the days of dial-up. And what a guy. I'll tell this one story about an interaction. So we would have, and there's still today from my grandmother's family, they have enormous family reunions in Nebraska. We're talking just for a couple of generations, hundreds of people that will attend these reunions. And I remember going at least one time as a child where we drove all the way from North Texas up to Nebraska in a caravan with some of my aunts and cousins. We went up there, and one day after lunch, I don't know, I was going somewhere and I had a piece of trash in my hand. I don't know where I got it from, probably from a candy bar or something like that. I threw it on the ground, as I'd seen other kids at this reunion do, older kids probably. My grandfather, he tells me, he says, "Travis, pick that up." And I looked at him, and I had a relatively smart mouth as a kid. I like to sort of talk back occasionally, and I told him, I said, "No." And he looked at me and he said, "You're going to pick that up or I'm going to give you a spanking." And so I looked at him. At this point, I was digging in. I was a complete and total idiot as a kid. And he commenced to drag me by one arm and put me over his knee and give me a spanking. And then, of course, I went and picked up my piece of trash and all the other pieces of trash that were around. But I say that to say, to my knowledge, I'm the only one of his grandchildren that he ever spanked. It wasn't something that he did lightly. And he was a dad to 4 girls, my mom being the oldest. And he had a tender, gentle heart, but he was also a warrior, and he demanded respect. And so we learned to grow to respect others. I came from a family that, my parents were disciplinarians. My dad expected a lot out of us, and we'll get into those stories. But today is about my mom's family. My mom had 3 sisters, all younger than her, one of whom was still in elementary school when my mom and dad married. So my mom and dad, just to give you a little snippet of their lives before we end today's episode, my mom and dad met in their sophomore year in high school in geometry class. And they got married at 19 years old. So shortly after they graduated high school, they got married. So I'll leave you there. The next episode, I want to dig into my dad's family a little bit and show you just how deep my roots are, not only into the United States, but into this area of North Texas. So there you have it, episode 1. These will not be heavily produced. I will splice out interruptions that I have from my kids and my dogs, but I'm not intending to do music. I am doing my best. This is as you see behind me, this is really honestly probably the best place I have for this. And again, this is really intended for me. If any of you end up watching this and are interested and share it around, that's great. Feel free to do so. I am putting it out in the public, doing this in front of anybody that watches, whether you know me, whether you don't know me. But feel free to follow along. I have a lot of stories, and we're going to get into them. We'll see you next time.